Sorry about that abrupt ending. Technical difficulties. So you'll see here in your game, extra screen load. Hide the sprite. Hide the HUD. Screen flag 3. This would be like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Screen flag 8. So then now we're checking if you're on the overworld map. If you're on the overworld map, you can switch to player. Checking the char select. This is the part that I mentioned in the first part of this video. The variable we created. 0 will be your main character. 1 will be your alt character. So if it's not 0, the alt. So if it is, then it goes to your original. So here's your alt. Gets the location they would have spawned in at. Right when it would have created them, it destroys the object and creates a new object. As I mentioned before, OE is our object. So this is object 0E. This is object 0F. That's 15, 14. Sorry. You'll see down here on the overworld, it's going to create object 15. That's the main. And that's the alt. The alt would be a different one on the overworld than the main would spawn. Okay, and then after that, that's the end of that check. So that's the check for the overworld. So we had to take care of that because before you go to the actual screen, so you're going start screen, you're making sure that the start screen stuff doesn't mess around with the other stuff. Then you're going character select and you're making sure the character select isn't messing around with the stuff from the start screen. Okay, and then once you get your character selected, now you got to make sure that it draws the right character on the screen. Now, if you were to start on an overworld screen and not on just a screen already, this is what would happen just in case you started on an overworld screen, which we set up in a previous video. This is to double check everything. If you don't have an overworld screen, this part's technically not needed. Okay, so we're done with that. Then we go to so you want to make sure you're oh yeah, this part, the ending checking selection part, that was in a different script. Hold on. In your inputs, you will see your script for your selection for start screen. That we set up the selection for start screen. Okay, so you're going to make sure that your end checking selection, where that is, you're checking your game state. You're comparing it to your character selection screen. If it's not the character selection screen, then it just goes not select. Tempex RTS. That was in the original file. It would have already went there if you didn't add all this anyway. If it is the character selection screen, it loads character select and it says if it's not 1, increase it to 1. If it is, then just jump. And then, if it's not 1, increase it to 1. If it is 1, decrease it. So when you're hitting the button, it's going, is it 1? No, it's 0. Okay, well, let's make it 1. Then it goes over and makes it 1. Then you hit the button again, and it's saying, is it 1? Yes, it's 1. Oh, well, we got to make that 0. So you just make it back to 0. You could also, instead of decreasing it, you could also just make it load 0 into your character select. You could also do that. Currently, my script just does this. But you could have also done that. Actually, here I'll because I'm probably gonna include this script into the something like that. I like to make it a little pretty when I make my scripts. Um, yeah, so it decreases it, or it does that. And then after it's done doing that, it just goes back to this. Anyway, yeah, so after that, you would want to make sure you still keep those lines like we said, because that was in the original. You want to keep those at the end of the script. Sorry. Alright, so post screen load is next. We have some game state checks we're going to add to the post screen load. So if you go to the post screen load script, I added all this stuff to my post screen load. So you got the game state check. If it's at the start screen, it's not the start screen, go there. If it is the start screen, then go here. So here's all the start screen stuff. Making sure though it loads 0 into the cursor, because when you're coming from another one or you're going to another one, you want to make sure that it's at 0 for your curse selection. If you're not, um, you'd already loaded uh, the lives to be a certain number. That was what the curse selection affected, basically, other than moving the thing around, the cursor around. So then you do the game state check. 0 equals the main game. So if it's the main game check, well, if in the main game you're going to want to make sure that um, char select. This is an old note. Um, it's checking if it's 1. If it's 1, go here. If it's not, then it's 0, basically. Then it go here. If it's the main character, it just doesn't do anything because that's how the default is already set up. If it isn't the main character, it's going to load all this stuff up. So you don't want to have to just do all this for the main character too. It's pointless to have to rewrite the whole script twice. Um, so yeah, so again, what it's doing is checking the game state. If it is, then it's going to 0 your curse selection. If it's not, it's going to load that palette. So this palette load, we already had this in the previous video before these videos. That's a good way to change your palette. We're using our char select right now to determine our palette. Now, right now in our game, it's telling it palette number 0 is your player palette. Palette number 1 is the other character's palette. So in the previous video, it showed him turning pink because all it was doing is changing this palette on every screen from the 0 to the 1, which is a great way to change your main character. If you have a one-player game and you want your main character to change without changing anything else, you could do that. It just takes that one line of code right here. And if you put it in your post screen load, it'll show up on every screen. So we have that. So when you choose your character, if you choose the alternate character, it uses her palette, which is pink, instead of using the brown palette, which is the main the 0 palette. So it uses 1 instead of 0. You could have this set up to an actual number that never changes. You could have this set up to a different number on every screen with the user screen variable. You could have it changed by different things, and a lot of things could change this number. You could have you pick up a power up and it changes the number that you load this from. Um, and then after that, it checks maybe some other variable and it changes back. Or it changes it to a specific one and then it checks this and turns it to this number all over again when it's done. Maybe you have a pickup that changes your color and then changes you back after a certain time period. So what's going on here is, again, it's double checking everything. It's making sure your cursor selection is at 0. Main game, if it's not the main game, it's on another game state, then it jumps here, the very bottom. You could add more stuff in here, but for now we're just keeping it that way. So now everything should work. It should be loading the character on the screen. It should be loading them the right color. Now we can test all this. The only thing that won't work is the inputs. I have the inputs fixed in my version, so they will work, but I'm not going to use the inputs. I'm just going to show you what it looks like without the inputs. So here you would pick normal or hard. If we pick normal, start with 3 lives currently. Pick hard, you start with 1. This should not affect your character. So right now, and then it makes the cursor tile the same one as on the start screen, and you can move the cursor. 160 is where the main cursor is, and it's going to the other number that we put down. Oh, hold on, this is wrong. In your sprite pre-draw, these numbers, and then these numbers are where it moves to. So it's saying put it here to start, and then move it here. And I put 120 because that's literally just, it's moving it 120 pixels to the right. So if you pick this one, it's going to be char select 0, and it's going to use sub palette 1, 0, palette 0. If you were to put 6 down in the script, it would make a different one. So right now it's going to use 1 for him, or 0 for him, 1 for her. A watch. So here's your post screen load. Here's that line of code. See, it made her show up on the screen. Okay, so now we're going to change that number here. No matter what, it's always going to use, we'll do 0. It's always going to use the main characters, the brown one. So now it's always going to use this one, even for her. So her color on this would even be like this. Gonna look like an old lady. So now watch this. That controls the palette. But when you have the char select as a variable, or you use a variable that's altered by pushing a button on an input, or some kind of factor, then it can change that variable, it can change what that part does. Right, so then there's your curve selection. Like I said, it's making sure that's okay. We have all this stuff that's working. Selection max value. You'll notice when you spawn, because you have no inputs that currently are working, you can't do anything except for maybe climb a ladder if it's on the same tile as you, or use your weapon if your weapon's able to be used facing down or facing the direction that you spawn in. Um, so you basically, they will work, because if you look in your inputs, your, where is it? The input that we altered for your ammo projectile, the shoot projectile with ammo, the one that we changed this number on in the first video. Alright, you'll notice that in the beginning of it, what it's doing is it's checking for if you could shoot, but then after that, it checks right here and says, let's load the player one object into the X register. That's not in a lot of the scripts. A lot of scripts don't have that. It's default. If you're using an object other than the main player, you need to have this in the script. So you have to change almost every single script that you're using in your game to accommodate that. For example, when you do your move left, you got to put this in the beginning. It already has all this. All you got to do is add this one line of code. You have to do that with every single script. So you got your move right. Stop moving. On your overworld, you got that move up. You got that move down. You got to add these to it too. Change to moving. Change to stop. You got to add that in every single script. Make sure it's in all of them. Jump through platform. Make sure that's in there. I did a lot of edits to this. I'm going to do a lot of these for the next videos after this, because I'm going to try to save us a lot of space in our project by moving a lot of your inputs away from the static input or the static bank. We're going to try to move a lot of stuff out of there in the future episodes, but just make sure that you have this as the first line in your code for your jump through. You notice though, like your variable jump, you don't have to have that. Or actually, I'm sorry, it's already in there. It was already in there. That's why you don't have to add it. It was already in there. Which is a Only a couple of them have it already in there. Your ladder scripts, they had that in there too. Your ladder script should already have that included. That's why I said if you start on a ladder tile, you should be fine because you would be able to climb up or down a ladder tile as well. I just like my scripts to look a little different. So make sure those are in all your scripts. So you go and you double check your input scripts. You'll see your LDXs are loaded into all of them. You don't need it for these ones. You can go to your input editor. Now in your input editor, you have to make sure you set everything up right. It's gonna be like your main game. You're gonna want to have it. You could just do your main first character, just your main player. You don't have to set it up with this. You could just do your main character. You'll see all mine are set up for my main character. It says player. So then you would go your main player. Then on your main game, you have to have your. Oh geez, it's still using the base from these for the ladder scripts. So I'm gonna have to change those really quick. We could do this on the fly. Okay, so we got climb ladder up, climb ladder down should be around like your top scripts if you had to rearrange anything. So I'm gonna delete these. And then I'm gonna put in my own. It's the same scripts, they're just in my folder. I didn't edit them. It's just in case I go to edit them. So what you're doing is you're doing main game. This will just show you a good example of how to set them up. You're holding up the player, which would be, I renamed as Max Housing. Climb ladder up. You're holding down. Climb ladder down. Delete the old ones. You'll notice everything else should be set up to our project folder. Let's double check that everything works. That one line of code, the LDX player, you add the player, or you're loading the player into the X register. Make sure that it's taking into account the other object as well. If you set up your movements, it should be the same as it was for your main player before on your overworld map, so everything should work the same. Alright, so when you're done with that, you just gotta make sure all your inputs have that LDX. There aren't any duplicates. I had to redo my overworld map inputs for the player one and set it for player one because it was set for the object before. And that's what we were doing as a default before. I didn't want to go and show you this edit until we got to this point. I was showing you the easiest way of doing that. Same thing with this. There's other ways to do this. It's just I just wanted to show that there's like one line of code that can change a whole lot of stuff if you do it like that. Um, if your overworld map isn't detecting your alt, you got to add that in there. Um, so I do it after the can switch player, and I was doing that. That was the post draw and all that. We're gonna do the moving the inputs out of the static bank next. That's the next video after this. So I think that everything is complete. If you want to customize your alternative player, we can do that in future videos, or you could do that. Um, so right now, I'm going to include a lot of this in a downloadable file format for you with the video. So I hope you enjoyed both videos, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.